Hello, listeners, and welcome to the White Rabbit Chronicles. My name is Angel, and my co host is named Dante. Would you like to say hi, Dante?
Welcome to the show, everyone.
For those of you who don't know, the White Rabbit has become an iconic symbol in both film and literature as a character that can travel between the worlds, as shown in Lewis Carroll's famous novels, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, as well as featuring prominently in the film The Matrix, where Neo is told to, quote, follow the white rabbit. So, in that spirit today, we're going to go down the rabbit hole into the concept of spirit possession, but not in the way that most have covered the subject in the past.
In 1973, the concept of possession went mainstream in America with the release of the acclaimed film The Exorcist. I was 12 years old at the time, and I went to see the movie with my brother from another mother. And it was an afternoon matinee, and there were mostly teenage girls in the theater. It was summertime, so fond memories. As we watched the film, my friend Enrique and I kept laughing at the girls when they screamed and squealed at the supposed scary parts. On the way home from the movie, he and I decided that the movie wasn't that scary, but when I tried to go to sleep that night, the green pea soup that the main character was spewing out got a lot scarier, and I couldn't sleep for the next 3 nights in a row after watching that movie.
An interesting note about the movie is that The Exorcist is actually based on a true story about a several months long exorcism by a Jesuit priest, or actually a few Jesuit priests, of a 14-year-old Maryland boy. And this happened back in 1949, so there was some truth to that movie.
Yeah, I know. At least one or two priests died from that in that process.
Yes.
Spirit possession appears to be a primal phenomenon in human evolution. In Albert Churchward's brilliant book, The Origin and Evolution of Religion, he writes, quote, the most essential part of religion assuredly originated in the worship of ancestral spirits. He also wrote, all ancestor worshippers have been spiritualists in the modern sense that they had evidence by practical demonstration that the so-called dead are still living in a rarer but not less real form. And finally, he writes, they believed in the spirits of their ancestors because they could see the corpuscular body after it was dead, and they propitiated and made offerings in order that the spirit of their ancestors should do no harm to the living humans. In other words, they could see their spirits after they had passed, so they knew that they still existed.
And in that vein, it's really important to define our terms here. Spiritualism, and the way that we're using it in the way it's most commonly defined, is, quote, the belief that the dead survive as spirits, which can communicate with living, especially with the help of a medium. And these are practices that are based on this belief. It's a philosophy that all reality is basically spiritual.
Spiritualism had a very definite starting point in America. To quote from Gizmodo.com, an article by Matthew Thompson entitled The Sisters Who Talked to the Dead and Sparked America's Seance Craze. The birth of America's spiritualist movement can be traced back to a quiet hamlet in rural New York and the popping joints of two little girls. It began in 1948 when sisters Kate and Margaret Fox of Hydesville, New York, decided to play a prank on their superstitious mother. The creaky farmhouse in which they lived was spooky enough, and rumors ran throughout their upstate community that a murder had occurred on the property, with the body still buried in the cellar. Margaret was 14 at the time, and Sister Kate just 11. The sneaky sisters began tying strings around apples, and at night they bounced the apples along the stairs, producing eerie thumps that echoed through the home. As the prank continued, their repertoire expanded to the cracking of their big toe joints, which produced a sharp rapping sound. Mother Fox, God bless her heart, never suspected her daughters. They were supposedly innocent children after all. The strange sounds had to be a ghost. On the evening of March 31st, Mrs. Fox lit a candle and searched the darkened home for her spirit. She ended in her daughter's shared bedroom. Margaret and Kate now had two options: fess up and face the consequences, or commit to the ghost story. They chose the latter. Peering into the darkened corner, Kate addressed the spirit. "Mr. Splitfoot," she said, "do as I do." She clapped her hands 4 times. 4 raps responded. Mrs. Fox, terrified, asked the spirit to count to 10. The appropriate number sounded. She then asked the spirit to reveal the number of children she had borne and the ages of each. For each question came the correct answer. Her final query: "If I were to call our neighbors, might you talk to them?" She got a positive response, and news quickly spread of the mysterious Fox sisters and their ability to communicate with the dead. When elder sister Leah, a 33-year-old divorcee living in Rochester, learned of their talents, she immediately appointed herself manager and took the sisters on tour. Leah whisked her siblings to Syracuse, then Albany, then sailed down the Hudson River to New York City. There, the Fox sisters conducted hundreds of seances for the city's cultural elite, including James Fenimore Cooper, Sojourner Truth, Evening Post editor William Cullen Bryant, and New York Post publisher Horace Greeley. By 1950, the Fox sisters were not just a toast of Manhattan, they were luminaries to the American spiritualist movement. Fame sadly proved too heavy a burden. All 3 sisters soon developed heavy drinking problems, and Leah's control over her siblings grew more extreme. Meanwhile, the nation's obsession with spiritualism triggered an explosion of flashier mediums, and the Fox sisters became old news. In 1988, Margaret, estranged from the others, accepted $1,500 from a reporter to admit that her life as a medium had been a lie. On October 21st, Margaret stood before a packed house at the New York Academy of Music and demonstrated every supposed deceit performed during her seances, including the signature rapping of her popping toe joint. She concluded the evening by denouncing spiritualism as the, quote, "the greatest curse the world has ever known." With that, the world turned its back on the Fox sisters. Though Margaret later withdrew her confession, it did little to salvage their careers. Within 5 years, all 3 women died of alcoholism and were buried in paupers' graves.
So it seems like it's a pretty straightforward case of sisters essentially scamming the public, but there is an interesting twist to this story. Years later, a group of children that were playing in the ruins of the Fox home, they were down in the cellar, and they found a crumbling wall. Behind this wall, they found a human skeleton. Doctors examined the remains and estimated that they were over 50 years old, lending credence to the ghost story that perhaps first inspired Kate and Margaret. So it's possible that Mr. Splitfoot had been there, buried behind that wall, all along.
Yeah, I was inspired to do today's topic by a book that I was gifted by my co-host a few weeks back. The book is entitled The Unquiet Dead by Dr. Edith Fiore. The foreword of the book was written by Dr. Raymond A. Moody, who wrote the book Life After Life, which is published in the 1970s and is the best book that I know of on the scientific proofs that consciousness survives the body and that reincarnation is true.
So, right from the very beginning of that book, it's a very interesting foreword by Dr. Moody. And he wrote, and I quote, "Is it possible that a disembodied spirit or entity from the beyond can seize control of the mind of a living human being in such a way as to cause that person distress in the form of disturbances of consciousness and of behavior? Despite the fact that Western psychology and medicine, by and large, have dismissed this possibility as unworthy of serious consideration, human beings from many cultures and over a period of thousands of years have insisted that it is a reality. Furthermore, in these cultures, various methods of depossession or exorcism have been employed for alleged possession illnesses, often with apparent healing effects on the sufferers. Frankly, I have no idea whether possession is ultimately real or not, but I do know two things. First, that I, like many other psychiatrists, have encountered in my practice a small number of very troubling cases in which the person involved seemed to be suffering from some peculiar alteration in consciousness which did not seem to fit within any category of mental illness known to me, and yet which resembled the description of a quote, possession, end quote, found in medieval literature. Secondly, it is fairly clear that persons who are treated as though they are suffering from a possessing entity sometimes report dramatic resolution of their symptoms after these procedures. End quote. So the doctor lays it out right from the very beginning that, hey, this is real, this works.
In the preface of her book, she wrote, quote, I am not attempting to prove that spirits exist, nor that that my patients were possessed. Rather, I will be showing you what goes on in daily life in my office and introducing a therapy that, although not a panacea, is effective and embodies ancient concepts within the context of 20th century hypnotherapy. My patients and I use the working hypothesis that personality does survive the death of the body. Do you think that your consciousness will survive the death of the body?
Well, I'd like to think so. I mean, to me, one of the most frightening things about thinking about death is that death is like a light switch. They shut off the light switch, everything goes black, and it's the end of the story. No credits, nothing. It's just the end. It's easier for me to believe that in some form, in some way, we go on. Maybe not in this particular dimension, but in some other dimension. And if I was to kind of steal some ideas from materialism, I could look at one of the laws of thermodynamics. You can't destroy or make energy. And if our consciousness is a form of energy and therefore it's indestructible, where does it go? I can't answer that. Dante?
I believe it doesn't go. It just still is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's no place to go. Everything is a point. All of space is a point, and the point is all of space. So whether it's a universe or a person, everything is just energy in a temporary vibrational form. The soul itself, I think, is that droplet of water that is part of the endless sea of energy that is where we exist, where the universe exists, where all possible universes exist.
And if we do become a higher form of energy upon death, would it be so hard to believe that this form of energy, this higher vibrational state, might gain the ability to reoccupy a person's body in the form of a possession? I mean, energy, electricity, many forms of energy can go right through your body. You have no control over it unless you're highly insulated. Um, but how about a spiritual electrocution? If spiritual energy in the form of a spirit goes through you and wants to stay in your body, is there any real defense against that? I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's the point of the book. Dr. Fiore wrote, since I became aware of this phenomena, I found that at least 70% of my patients were possessed. And this is not demonic possession, and that's actually the difference that we're talking about here today.
Right.
It's spirit possession of people that have died as opposed to demonic possession. And she continued, it was this condition that caused their dis-ease. Also, for these spirits, there was no more worse fate than sentencing themselves to residing in other individuals' bodies, for they were postponed their chances to enter the spirit world where they belonged. So her patients weren't the only ones that she was dealing with. She ended up looking at the possessing spirits as being her patients too, because they had a need to move on, even though they didn't realize it or refused to realize it or were confused and whatever.
And I think that's one of the things that made this book so interesting for me because when you think about classical possession, the Catholic tradition, the Islamic tradition is also very similar. You think of an evil spirit entering a body, and the job of the exorcist, the depossessor, it's a very enemy versus good guy. It's they are the great enemy, and it's the job of the exorcist to expel this great enemy from the other person's body. But the way that Dr. Edith Fiore handles it, he says, no, they're both patients, they're both victims in some way. The possessing spirit isn't the enemy out to be destroyed, but it's a spirit that needs help to get on through to the light. And reading back through her book, there's a very interesting quote. Helping these possessing spirits to leave resulted in eliminating their devastating effects, often dramatically changing lives. And then she goes right into her reason for writing the book, quote, because depossession works, I felt a need to write this book, end quote. And that's interesting. Not only because she wrote it not because she wanted necessarily fame and fortune, but she wanted to tell the world how she's been treating her patients, but also in a way to show you that you don't necessarily need to be a priest, an ordained priest, ordained minister. You don't need to be a shaman or an imam to effect a successful depossession or exorcism, if you want to call it that. But a caring individual, knowing what they're doing, following these steps, can really help and change a person's life. I find that very empowering.
Um, Dr. Fiore had several hypnotherapy patients that eventually led to her to try the depossession techniques that she used.
Yes. Uh, One was a guy who suffered from severe sexual problems. He accidentally found himself regressed to a previous life where he was a Catholic priest of all things. You know, talking about priests in the 17th century.
No wonder he was repressed.
Yeah, he was carrying some heavy duty Catholic guilt issues. Another case was a woman with severe phobia of snakes and was plagued by regular nightmares about them. And it turned out that the experience that led to this phobia was related to a previous incarnation. So, not her current life, but something that had happened in the past. But in each case, there were results dramatic enough to cause Dr. Fiore to pursue depossessions, even though she didn't really believe in spirit possession at that point.
Yeah, she wrote that in the early years, she found many patients slipping into other personalities while in hypnotic trance. And she wrote, I assumed these were multiple personalities and dealt with them as though they were,
Mm-hmm.
right, like in multiple personality disorder. Well, in my mid 20s, I got to experience exorcisms, personally. Um, I walked into the gym one day after work. My girlfriend worked at ran the gym, and she was talking to a middle-aged gentleman on a life cycle, a stationary cycle, and she introduced me to him. I thought it was strange. He introduced himself as Dr. Bill,
Hmm.
which, off the top of my head, sounded a little eccentric. And we talked for a couple minutes, and he told me what he did, and then he just said, "Would you like to take part in an exorcism?" And I think a lot of people might have been, weirded out or, kind of taken aback. But I was like, "Yeah, sure. Like, what do I need to do?" And what I was tasked to do was to basically hold the patient down while they did the exorcism, because it was illegal to strap the patient down,
Hmm. Okay.
right, while under hypnosis. And so after the patient had been taken into the back office and laid down on a sofa and, hypnotic trance, the uh, priest and I entered the back room. It was kind of weird. I kind of sat on the edge of the couch and put my hands on her arms as they started. It was kind of weird because I wasn't really holding her down. I was just kind of positioning for what she did, whatever she was going to do, because I didn't know what to expect.
Right. Just in case.
Yeah. And so uh, the priest was actually a police sergeant that had gone through seminary school and had done his thesis on exorcisms.
Hmm.
I still have a copy of his exorcism, his thesis. So they start doing first the doctor starts talking to different personalities, and there are multiple personalities, and there are like male personalities and female personalities. The only one whose name I remember is Jeff, because that one kind of stuck out. That was like the protector one, personality or something. I don't know. But then another personality had popped up, and this is the reason for the exorcism. It called itself the Other. Oh man, I don't know if it's just the Other.
No other name, just the other.
Yeah, we are the Other, and
Wow.
so okay. So then once they got to that personality, the priest started in with the actual exorcism. The Psalms and the name of Christ and all that stuff. And the lady starts going crazy. And, I was real good shape, 5'10" and a half, 170, 75 pounds. And she was about 5'10", about 145, 150, sturdy German woman.
Okay.
Well, she starts going nuts, and pretty soon we're on the floor, and I'm on top of her trying to keep her from kicking me, punching me, scratching me, biting me, kneeing me. And, I got to do this while not hurting her,
Right.
and so, there are times when she'll go nuts for a minute, and then it'll stop, and then it'll change. And uh, about an hour and 45 minutes later, finally, we thought we'd gotten rid of the spirit. And, um, that was one of the best workouts, I'd ever had. I used to run, X amount of, 6 to 8 miles just to warm up for my workout. And anyway, 2 weeks later, the Dr. Bill tells me that it tricked us and we had to do it again.
Wow.
So go back to do it again, and the second time something happened that didn't happen the first time. Because the first time nothing, there wasn't no spitting up of, green pea soup or, whatever.
Nothing like the movie.
Nothing like, no, nothing supernatural. But the second time, um, uh, the entity started attacking me, started like threatening me and to curse me and all these other things. And
Did it know your name?
no,
Okay.
no. Good point though. But at one point, I'm on, on top of this lady, almost, just a few inches from her face, and her, suddenly her eyes pop open and they are super red. I mean, you couldn't even see the eyeballs, just the whole. It was freaky, and I like snapped back, but I raged back down to put her back in her place, and she closed her eyes. And even though I wouldn't necessarily call it supernatural, because I don't necessarily believe in the term supernatural, but there's No, I mean, I've seen people with very, very red eyes, you know, very red eyes, uh, but nothing like this bright red, fire engine, like,
Something definitely wrong. Red
wow.
eyes.
Yeah.
Now, question: were you the only assistant?
The only one holding her down?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Should have had somebody like, 6'5", 275, and he would have had a much easier time holding her down.
And Dr. Bill, was he? He was
He was a
priest,
licensed psychiatrist. No, he was a, yeah, psychiatrist.
so he wasn't a
No,
priest at that time.
no, no, no. The priest was a police sergeant that had gone to seminary school. He's the one that did the exorcism.
Got you.
So it was a psychiatrist, a priest, and me.
So was Dr. Bill doing or saying something different while the priest was going through the rites of exorcism?
Um, when they were doing the actual like, uh, it was help. Yeah, yeah. Dr. Bill was helping in the name of Christ. Da, 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 da. But he wasn't reading the Psalms. So the priest was reading the Psalms, and they were both doing in the name of Christ.
Right, really a really good book that I recommend to any of our listeners that are interested in reading a little bit about the subject of exorcism. It's a book that I bought many years ago. Was Hostage to the Devil by Malachi Martin. He was a guest on Coast to Coast AM radio with Art Bell. He's since passed away. He's no longer with us. But one of the things that he said in his book, which I found very interesting, and in his interviews he also mentioned this, he said that every time I've done an exorcism, and he had done many exorcisms, he said that every time it took a little bit away from me. I was not the same man, not the same priest that I was after this exorcism, even though they were all successful. And his idea, his thinking, was that little by little, being involved in this was killing him. And he did end up dying. I'm not sure if it was premature or if it was, before one would expect to die. But he said that he could feel it sapping his strength. That he, an exorcism is not, or an exorcist's life, it's not necessarily a good thing. It's not really what you want to be.
It sounds to me it's a principle of magic.
Hmm.
You're using a lot of energy,
Right, and
and so yeah, I mean it's just like running a marathon. You're using a lot of energy to spiritual energy to eliminate those spiritual entities.
it reminds me of something that Nietzsche, or no, Dr. Jung, Carl Jung once said. He said, if you look into the darkness long enough, and I'm loosely paraphrasing this, if you look into the darkness long enough, sooner or later the darkness will look into you.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings. Remember when you see the eye sees
It
you.
sees you, yeah. And there's been many other, going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but many other paranormal researchers have had the same experiences. Nick Redfern, uh, Albert Bender back in the 50s and 60s when he was doing his experimentation with UFOs. He had visitations from Men in Black. So there's been a variety of paranormal researchers who have said that after many years of looking into this area, eventually something noticed them. So to all our listeners, you have been warned. Now, going back to Dr. Edith Fiore, she had many interesting quotes in this book, and one of them talks about why the spirits remain among us. Because you would think if you die, you see the light, you want to go to heaven, but not in every single case. She said, quote, the most usual are ignorance and confusion. The spirits don't realize or don't want to realize that they're dead. Also, fear, especially of going to hell, obsessive attachments to living persons or places, or addictions to drugs, alcohol, food, or sex. Also, a misguided sense of unfinished business often compels spirits to stay in the physical world. Some remain determined to get revenge, end
Yeah,
quote. Wow.
yeah. Some of them, they just haunted their murderers.
Hmm.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. And, in some ways,
In a
thinking
way.
that any spirit is potentially a spirit that could possess people is scarier than the idea of only demons being able to possess people, because you think a demon, they're not that common. You're not going to run into a demon any day of the week. But spirits, humans are all around us. People are dying all the time. You walk by a cemetery or go to a hospital, the spirits of the dead are everywhere.
Well, that's kind of what bugs me too. Is that it seems so easy, and in retrospect, looking, analyzing others and myself, it 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 makes so much more sense understanding that. So as we continue, she wrote, communicating with these spirits through hypnotized patients, I have learned that some people were so convinced during their own lifetimes that there was nothing after death, they simply refused to see the family members or spirit guides who came for them. Instead, they drifted aimlessly in a state of confusion and ignorance that often lasted for years. And when questioned, they usually denied that they were dead at all. They would say something like, when you're dead, you're dead. I'm here now, so I'm no more dead than you are.
That's so interesting. You would think that, hey, you're dead. You're dead.
No, I'm not. I can see you. If I can see you, I'm not any more dead than
So
you
I
are.
must not be dead, which is why they hang around. Which is, it's such a human reaction, the denial of death. If you think about it, I mean, everybody denies their own mortality. They think everybody thinks they're going to live forever, which is why we smoke and drink and treat our bodies like animals.
Well, I don't know about everybody,
Well,
but
not.
I know what you're saying, though.
I'm painting with some very broad strokes here, but in general, people tend to do things that they know they shouldn't do, with this idea that it couldn't happen to me. They deny their own mortality, and I thought that's so interesting that Dr. Fiore wrote that a lot of ghosts, or a lot of spirits, for lack of a better term, they deny their own death. That's so interesting.
No, I mean, it's like a dream. Are you dead when you're dreaming? I mean, you're not in your body.
Right.
You seem to be in another vehicle that's experiencing some things because you're still feeling and smelling and hearing. So, I mean, again, that's not your body. So, are you alive there? Are you alive somewhere else? One of the things that I take in my dreams, when
Mhm.
I know that I'm dreaming, I'll take over my dream and start doing cool shit like flying and manifesting a weapon, just thinking about it or whatever, catching bullets or
Sounds fun.
yeah, right. Um, I can't. I try to see myself in the mirror. I try to take control of my body and find a mirror. And every time I go to try to see myself, something happens and I switch. I mean, the dreams morph constantly into other scenes, right?
Right.
But I, I don't really like looking in the mirror normally. But I've been trying for decades now to see myself in the mirror when I'm in some other body. Do I still look like me? Am I 300-pound black woman? I don't know. But that's something that's always been
That's
I
very
find very trippy.
interesting. I watched a movie a long time ago called The Waking Life, an excellent movie. It goes into existential philosophy, and in that movie, it was all about dreams and dream states. They said that whenever you're in a dream, if you want to know if you're dreaming or in the waking life, you can try light switches. Light switches never work in dreams. I thought, wow, that's
Okay,
interesting.
fair enough.
Or look at your clock.
That's what I remember. I don't hearing or reading that. Look at the clock. Is there a clock?
Yeah, the
So
time is not going to go
so maybe
forward.
that's one of those things where since there's no time and space and you don't really exist, you don't get to see those things in a dream state. I don't know. Just
Maybe
throwing that out there.
maybe it's just something we all made up. Time.
Well, somebody did.
Yeah. Well, going back to Dr. Fiore's book, it's another interesting quote that I found fascinating. She said, quote, some people are in such a profound state of confusion when they died that they simply didn't realize that they were dead. This is particularly true of suicides, end quote. And then she writes furthermore, quote, it appears that when they commit suicide, they are only postponing the working out of their lessons and retarding their spiritual progress, for they will have found themselves in another test situation with suicide as a strong option in some future life, end quote.
This passage that you just quoted I found particularly interesting. On the first part, I kind of don't get it. If you're
Mm-hmm.
sitting there trying to commit it, you just jumped off the Empire State Building, which you
Sure.
can't do anymore. But you know that when you hit, you're gonna die. How can you be confused about just committing suicide? You cut your wrist, and you just sit there. You look at your back at your body, and how do you not realize that you just committed suicide? That one I don't get. But still,
I mean,
um,
yeah, if I land on a car, I'm not going to get up and say, "'Tis but a scratch."
yeah,
That's not.
I don't know. But the second one was very personal because at 16, I came very close to suicide twice. I mean, I was in the moment. I was in the process of committing suicide. I was at Balboa Park one
Mm-hmm.
time on that overpass on Laurel Street that goes over the 163. I was climbing. I was with some friends hanging out. I was depressed. My girlfriend and I had just broken up again, and I didn't know how to deal with the pain.
Hmm.
I could deal with physical pain because I could see that it healed in a week or two or whatever.
Right.
But with the emotional pain, man, it seemed to keep getting worse. I couldn't understand. I couldn't get it. It just I just wanted the pain to stop. And so I was climbing over the wall, and a friend of mine just kind of yelled out to me because the three friends of mine had kind of wandered ahead, and I stopped. And as I looked over, I looked down. I started like going into like a trance. As I was starting to go over, I realized I was, and looking back, I was like going into this like weird trance state as I was just starting to fall over the bridge, and that was that yelling that they called out my name. It woke me up, and I pulled back. But I mean, I was over the edge.
Sounds like almost a dissociation
Um,
where your mind is separated from the body, where
I
like a
don't know.
break.
I don't know. It's like maybe I don't know.
It's interesting because I mean I also remember growing up and or the years around 13 to 18 were incredibly difficult. And when I think back, yeah, some good things happened, but I remember carrying also a lot of pain, and on more than one occasion, I thought and felt that why am I still alive? Why am I still here? Why must I carry this pain? And I remember I was fascinated with the idea of just ending it, turning off the light switch, just and making the pain stop from things that I couldn't control in my life. And I remember feeling so profoundly. It was almost obsession. And I know that had things turned out differently growing up, I'm I might not even be here talking to the listeners right now because it anyone that thinks that being a teenager, particularly being emotional as a teenager, um, it is easy. Um, they don't remember what it was like being a teenager, or they had a very privileged life growing up. So when I hear these cases where of suicides, maybe the inclination is, well, they had it coming to them, and that's why they're trapped. But I can see Dr. Fiore's angle where she actually feels empathy for them, where she wants to reach out and help them move on into the light and understands that they made a choice. It wasn't a good choice, it wasn't the best choice, but it was a choice that they made.
Well, so there were two times that I almost committed suicide. After the second one, shortly thereafter, I almost drowned. After summer league basketball practice, I drove some friends out to the beach, and We all started heading down the pier, and some fool halfway down the pier decided to jump in and swim back to shore.
Hmm.
And then some other fools, went a little further down the 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 walkway, and 3/4 of the way down, they jump in and start swimming back to shore. Well, the three biggest idiots go all the way down to the end, and then jump in and start swimming to shore. Well,
Oh,
of course, I was one of the three biggest idiots,
no.
and so I'm swimming to shore, and I'm I'm swimming hard, and I'm going backwards, and I start thinking about going, sideways, because it's like, okay, I'm in the rip current or something, and pretty close to the freaking dock, and um, my I was thinking, I'm looking at the beach, and I'm not gonna make it to the beach straight in a straight line, much less at an angle. And I call out to one of my other three biggest idiot friends, and I'm like, Bobby, I'm not gonna make it. And he comes back and grabs me and starts to try to pull me with him, and now we're both going backwards. And so I couldn't move my legs. I could barely move my arms enough to take his arm off of me, and I like go, and then I just sank.
Wow.
And well, I became immediately depressed, because I'm looking up at about, I don't know, 10, 12 feet of water above me, and I don't know, 10 or 12 feet below me, kind of floating in the middle. Uh, and I'm 16, and this is how it ends, and I'm like, oh my God, my mother is gonna freak. I'm like, there were other people couldn't be upset.
Right.
My mom, oh my goodness, man, she was gonna freaking freak out. And then I kind of like wonder what the newspaper is gonna say, uh, um, and so I was under there a long time. When you're, anytime you hold your breath, you know what that sensation is like. That
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
you just can't not gasp for air.
Right. It burns inside.
Well, I'm underwater for 2 3 minutes, and I'm still holding on to my breath, and I'm like, kind of just looking around, and sun up above me, and I start to see the light. I start to all of a sudden, I'm like surrounded by this like warm, golden, bright light. It feels like comforting. It feels like you're going home. And all of a sudden, I get this bright idea, because I couldn't move my thighs or my arms, but
Hmm.
I got really big calves, and I could move my feet, and I could wiggle. So I get this bright idea to wiggle to the bottom, push off with my feet, and go up and try to grasp some air. So obviously, I'm here speaking about this, so I survived, right? But I did that. I, wiggled to the bottom, pushed up, uh, couldn't quite get to the top, so I had to wiggle to the top, and barely stick my head up enough to grab a little bite of air, sink to the middle, wiggle to the bottom, push off to the top. So I do this 5 times, because
Wow.
the other two big idiots in the meantime are being saved by the one lifeguard. So before the first time I popped up, it was at least 4.5 5 minutes. In that process, I realized, one, there's no such thing as death, which led me to do a lot of stupid, crazy things later in my life. But again, I survived. Um, but I also realized that uh, I had a karmic debt to not commit suicide in this lifetime.
A feeling.
Yeah, I had no, I had studied my dreams, and for a couple years, from like 14 through whatever, and one of the things that I realized in studying my dreams is that every night that I could remember, I would have flashes that were all kind of consistently the same. Um, I would have a flash of a knife, I'm like seeing purple. It's like I thought it was a purple room,
Hmm.
but I'm being like stabbed to death. And then another one, I flash about driving a white convertible off a bridge and like into canyon, or like on a Rocky Mountains kind of setting. It just, I was maybe a female driving a, uh,
Almost like a Thelma and Louise type
yeah,
situation.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I just all I see is going off the bridge down into the ravine. Well, I realized that I had drowned before because it was very, uh, it felt like I'd been there before. I'd done this already.
Deja vu.
Yeah, kind of like that. So, um, with the pain that I've been going through, one of the things that has to come up is like, geez, this quality of life. Um, but I can't even contemplate the concept of suicide. Actually, I made a promise to God when I was 16. After that, surviving that almost drowning, I made a promise that I would never commit suicide, and it's really only because of that promise that I'm still alive, quite frankly.
Some agreements that we make with the universe in some ways. You look after me, and I'll look after you. It's weird because I had my own near death or near drowning experience also, but mine was a little bit different. It was an accident. I'd gone with some friends down to San Felipe, and we were at a hotel getting way too drunk. And one person there threw he threw a girl into the pool. She was very drunk, very drunk. Well, this girl didn't know how to swim. So I see her going under, screaming for help, and like an idiot, I jump in. I'm not a very strong swimmer, but I was gonna save the day, and I was kind of drunk myself. So as I go into the water to try to save her, she does what's instinctual. She grabs my shoulders and tries to pull herself up by pushing me
A lot of people drown that
down.
way. That happens a lot. They take their wannabe saviors down with them.
Yeah, well,
I mean, at least I had enough sense to force him off me to go. It's like, I mean, I can never forget the fact that he came back and tried. You know,
yeah.
and so I repaid him by forcing him to go.
Well, she held me under for so long the water started going into my lungs. She was doing okay, even though she was in a panic, but I was dying. And I had that weird. I didn't have the full light experience like you did, but I did have that. I knew that I was on the edge of literally drowning. Water was coming in. I couldn't hold my breath anymore. I was panicked. And just at the last second, someone yanked her out, and I was able to come up for air. And that first breath of air after you've nearly drowned, you will
Desperation.
never
Desperation.
have
Well, that's actually
such great
what
air.
saved me was that feeling. You got, oh my God, you
Yeah,
just can't not gasp.
yeah,
I gasped, but I didn't open my mouth. I did the whole release, but I just recycled what little air I had in my lungs, and I didn't open my mouth, and that's what gave me the extra 2 3 minutes to do the figure out the wiggle thing
yeah.
finally. But I had to gasp for air. I was probably 2.5 3 minutes into that.
I just remember that first breath of air, I'd never appreciated air so much in my
Well,
life.
hey, everybody out there, try really holding your breath for 30 seconds and see how desperately you gasp for air. Because being underwater somebody said that I was underwater for at least 5 minutes before the first time I came up. I don't know. I kind of lost real sense of time. I knew it was a while, but whatever.
And take it from the White Rabbit, all listeners out there. If you're drunk or under the effects of crazy drugs, stay the hell out of the water. Do not go into water and never throw anyone into the water ever.
Oh, and check out Wim Hof, the Iceman.
Yeah.
He has some really interesting training techniques. I found out that the world record for like holding your breath underwater is like 23 or 24 minutes.
Wow.
I thought you'd be brain dead in 10 minutes or something. I don't know,
That's
but
what I thought.
I was really surprised when I looked that up.
Winhoff is he's another
He's badass,
topic
dude.
for another show, but
Yeah,
yeah, he's a badass.
yeah, we gotta do that.
Okay, going back to Dr. Fiore, and this is another reason people stick around. Quote, other entities confessed to being so ashamed of their former deeds that they didn't want to see their spirit loved ones. Often, those who were brought up with a strong sense of a religious background were terrified of going to hell. These frightened spirits often desperately resisted the helpers who appeared at the time of their deaths. End quote. Interesting.
This is the area that I found most interesting about the book. Like the one character who had practiced devil worship and believed his mother would never forgive him because she was a staunch Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
and he was a criminal drug addict who stated to Dr. Fiore, "They're good, and I can't go where they are because I did things like drink and steal and roll people."
Shame. Deep shame.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. I mean, religion, for all the good it does, it also creates shame that could even follow us into the afterlife. That's crazy. I'll throw another quote in there from the book. Quote, obsessive attachment to the living was another compelling reason that some entities remained earthbound. Parents stayed to, quote, help their children as they grew up. Marital partners remained out of loving concern for their spouses. And, but no matter how well meaning the motives, the attachment of spirits always caused serious problems. End quote. So this is so interesting. Spirits stayed behind because they wanted to help loved ones. They didn't want to abandon their parents, they didn't want to abandon their spouse. So, hey, I'm going to stick around to help. But in so doing, in sticking around, they caused incredible suffering from the people that they were, quote, helping. Isn't that ironic?
Well, a lot of times when you're trying to help someone, you're maybe not helping them so much. Uh, I used to help people so much, as one friend of mine told me one time. He said, "You remind me of a guy who's underwater and you're holding someone else above you. You're saving them, but you're drowning."
Yeah.
And I had to because I used to, I'd find people that needed help, and I would try to help them more than they were willing to help themselves. And I had to learn not to do that,
But, I mean,
to my own detriment, especially.
but not all the motives of these possessing spirits were good, though, were they?
No, I mean, not only were they often malicious, they were vengeful. If they had been murdered or felt that they had been wronged, they stayed just the liberty to hurt their murderer.
So
Instant karma.
that little revenge
Literally,
was,
instant karma. You get up. Oh, you killed me. Oh, you're mine now.
I'm going to haunt you.
Oh, yeah.
So take it from the White Rabbit. Don't murder people
Don't go
because
down that rabbit hole.
the
Won't
spirit,
like it.
yeah, the spirit may not leave. Here's another interesting quote. One of the strongest ties that bound spirits to the physical world was addiction to alcohol, drugs, sex, smoking, even food. If a person died while in the grips of such addiction, the most overwhelming need was for the addictive substance or sensation. The spirit was blind to leaving, seeking only to fulfill the compulsion. Spirit guides and relatives were ignored. The bright light went unnoticed. And another quote, spirit addicts tended to cluster around living addicts and the places they frequented, attempting to experience again what was once the dominant theme of their lives. End quote. That is so interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting.
This was also tremendously fascinating. The spirits are still able to experience the sensations of addiction after possession of individuals. I mean, they get to feel what it was like to get stoned,
Yeah.
get laid,
Drunk.
have, drink whatever it is they're going to drink, whatever they, were, obsessed about, well, addicted to. And that's the point.
That's nuts.
Understanding why, the priesthood was always trying to, purify and all that. There are reasons for that path.
And the interesting or horrifying thing is that if somebody was an alcoholic, well, according to this, they would hang out in places where other people. So breaking it down, you could go to a bar.
She wrote, People who are addicted to drugs, including alcohol, usually open the door to possession by indulging in the drugs first, and thus attracted the addicted spirits. But in other cases, they were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, at a bar or a party that by its nature had attracted spirits waiting to indulge.
Wow.
Almost without exception, when there was a drug or alcohol addiction, the patient harbored more than one entity who were also addicts. So that's what I was talking about. You might not just be, if you've had, you know, pushed your limits a little bit. Who knows how many uh, spirits have attached to your aura?
It's not the first time that I've heard that alcohol and also particularly hallucinogens, LSD, can open the doors for possession,
Well,
can open you up.
alcohol, basically, al means kind of like God, and then ghoul. Al Ghul means God spirit.
Yeah.
They're literally Osiris. Interestingly, the god Osiris
Hmm.
is credited with creating beer,
Okay.
so alcohol. So
The
he
god of
made it
beer.
much easier for spirits to possess the human aura.
So, in other words, you can go to a bar, or if you are hanging around places where addicts, people, you could, go to an adult bookstore where sex addicts, porn addicts would hang out, a brothel or a bar. And in indulging in this, you could theoretically open yourself up to being possessed and by spirits who are going on a joyride inside your body. That's crazy.
Yeah, man. Well, the one who's possessed often does has inexplicable compulsions to do things that they wouldn't normally do or they didn't used to have an interest in. Um, you know, uh,
But and then one of the things I noticed also in reading the book or reading through the book is that it's another interesting quote tying in with the addiction. Quote, no matter what needs they are desperately seeking to fulfill, earthbound spirits are immensely frustrated, confused, and unhappy. They can find no peace or lasting satisfaction while inhabiting other people's bodies. They are truly lost souls who do not know they are hurting themselves. And another quote, their influence on the unknowing host's lives and behavior is always negative, sometimes fatal. That's scary.
and this next quote, was relevant to me because of my chronic pain. She wrote, if their deaths involved physical pain, this continues unabated. So you can't stop the pain.
Wow.
Um, Even for decades, if they were anesthetized by or drugged by alcohol, uh, prescription or illicit substances before they died, they feel spacey and out of it for as long as they're earthbound. So, you drive, and then, you get drunk and you have a car accident, you're gonna stay spacey and maybe that's one reason why sometimes they're confused because they're still drunk.
Spiritually drunk.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's weird. Um, so possessing entities who committed suicide continue to feel desolate regardless of what their hosts experience. They remain abjectly depressed. So
Interesting.
if you think you're gonna stop this, the physical or psycho emotional pain by suicide,
It's not going to
nope,
help.
nope. Hopefully that changes a lot of people's minds if they ever hear this.
And no easy solutions, no magical pills. You can't do something easy. You have to do the work.
You don't gain character, the easy way.
And I think that was one of the like maybe unintended moral consequences that she talked about in her books that if you don't do the work that it takes to get through that rough spot in your life and you take the easier way out, the fast way out, you're not doing yourself any favors long term.
This is relevant to all of society. Okay, globally, we need to grow up individually and collectively.
Yes.
As we need to grow up and act as adults, as sovereign beings, take responsibility for everything we say and do, and realize that we're all in it together.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah, well, there's no I in team, right?
no,
I
but there's
mean,
me.
there's I know it's a cliche, but it's so
There's
true. We
also meat.
meat space. Yeah, but we tend to think that we're lone rangers in this world, that we're it. The Greeks call it solipsism, which was this philosophy that you are the only person that exists in the world. And it's almost like that's being promoted nowadays, but it's not true. Carl Jung, when he talked about the collective unconscious and how we're all truly connected, he was closer to the truth than the solipsists. So, and I know I'm butchering that pronunciation, but solipsist.
That's someone who's really sloppy, right?
Here's yeah, it's a sloppy pronunciation of solipsists. Uh, Possession isn't always, and going back to your point as far as the movie The Exorcist, you think that when somebody's possessed, they are flying through the air and barfing up the green pea soup and they're completely gone, except for moments of lucidity. But Dr. Fiore in her book wrote that the degree of possession can, quote, range from nearly total, in which case the original inhabitant is almost completely replaced, to a very minor influence. Some of the factors that determine the extent of the possession are the intrinsic strength of the individual compared to that of the possessing spirit, and conditions that weaken the possessee, like stress, drug abuse, illness, etc. And another quote: if the possessed drink, especially if they get drunk, they're unwittingly giving control to the entities. Blackouts are examples of total, though temporary, surrender of the unconscious or of the conscious. That is why others say, quote, he's a completely different person when he's drunk, end quote. So what she's saying here is that maybe how people drink, their personalities will change. Maybe when someone gets drunk and their personality does a complete 180 degrees, it might be a little bit more than just the alcohol talking.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting because I was always afraid of alcohol growing up. I used to hang out with friends who did all kinds of things, and
Hmm.
I'd watch how they acted on different substances. I was a designated driver for everybody, and so I'd make sure, I drive everybody there, and I'd make sure afterward, during the party or whatever, that everybody was safe and nobody started in trouble. Doing the same thing I'm doing now at the bar. Um, I was deathly afraid of doing alcohol because I was afraid of losing control and acting the way they acted when I saw them, the way they acted. Um, and training in martial arts since I was in my teens, I was afraid of losing control, hurting somebody, and ending up in prison because I got drunk and did something stupid. And now that I work do security at a bar, I get to see people's shifts.
Yeah,
When they walk in as opposed to when they walk out, for example.
different person. And it's weird that you think about, you know that you shouldn't get drunk, and now Dr. Fiore is adding something that you really need to worry about. You could become possessed, and it. I I mean, I hate to bring this to something that may or may not be the case, but when I when I watch the news, particularly in light of the recent shooting at the Walmart, and I see all these cases of people that were the loners, were for the most part they never did anything violent, and then one day something just snaps. I know that in many cases it's psychological, and the easy answer is, well, weapons control, we need more gun control. Fine. But that's a band aid beneath a bigger problem, in my opinion. And I think we're just ignoring the harder question of what psychological issues are plaguing youth of today that are causing these people to snap. But what if some of these cases, is it possible that some of these cases could be related to a spirit possession?
That actually, well, if some of these events, these shootings, are as some quote unquote conspiracy theorists would say are false flag events,
Hmm.
and are actually some type of intelligence service psyop, then the techniques used, like for example in MK Ultra, would actually be splitting the consciousness. So
Mhm.
you're creating an alter that will do that, even though it's the primary personality would not do that. So that's exactly part of the point of the process, is to create alters that will serve their uses.
I remember hearing stories of MK Ultra where they were using phenobarbital, LSD, a variety of other hallucinogens, mild and major hallucinogens, with the ultimate goal of creating a split personality, one of which would be a killer, an assassin, that could be programmed very deep within the psyche and then activated at will. So that was part of their research. They wanted to create a group of assassins on demand, people that didn't know they were assassins, which in many ways would be the ultimate assassin.
A lot of this started in the 40s and 50s because it was the reason why it's called MK Ultra, as in mind control with a K Ultra,
Mm-hmm.
is because in German you spell control with a K and not a C. And the techniques and the doctors that were had developed them were mostly Nazi doctors, and they were part of Operation Paperclip. And so those scientists were the ones that were doing all these MK Ultra experiments.
Yeah,
Now, officially, MK Ultra was terminated in the 70s,
officially.
officially, but in actuality, it has not stopped. It continues. And there's been, call it different names, they just change the name and still do the same thing.
I'm curious, does the age of the child or the person
Well, that's a key factor.
possessed, is that a factor?
Mhm. It's a key factor because many people are possessed as children, especially following, intense sicknesses, hospitalizations. Uh, a lot of spirits hang around the hospital after they die, and they attach themselves to a conveniently weakened host. The possession weakens, the child's aura, and then creates further vulnerability from then on. So just keep attaching more and more because if you don't do things, I mean, yeah, I started trying to be. I was a wannabe athlete starting at age 8.
Mm-hmm.
And from that age, I used to train every day. I did running and jumping, this, that, and the other. Um, and things like that, as you know, will strengthen your aura. We're talking about, you can't just take a pill and instantly makes you strong and fast and jump higher. That takes work. That's the same thing with
Right.
developing your psycho-emotional character. It takes exercising the right attitudes and thinking the right thoughts and, like Buddhism, right? Right,
Sure.
right thought, right action.
It just seems really cruel that the children get possessed. I mean, I can't. What kind of what just God, if you choose to believe in a deity God, would allow children?
Talk about talk about rabbit holes. That's a whole
Yeah,
big yours rabbit hole.
that's another show
We're not
topic.
gonna.
We don't want
That's
to touch
another.
that one.
That might be a series if. But
That's
anyway,
classical philosophical debate. But here's something curious, and Dr. Fiore went into this. She talked about the spirits, the gender of the spirit, not always matching the gender of the spirit possessee. And she said that when people are possessed by spirits of the opposite sex, their hormonal systems appear to be effective always negatively. And it's something you don't really think about. I mean, what if it's another gender? What's going to happen to the host? And she says that in many patients, one reason for a diminished sex drive was as a result of this type of possession. And, quote, possessions by spirits of the opposite sex often results in tension and distance between marital or relationship partners. Frequently, the possessors dislike the spouses or even hate them. Since the possessed accept these emotions as being their own, havoc ensues, wrecking relationships. End quote. That's crazy. That is crazy because
can you imagine
I never thought of that.
all of a sudden you start having PMS
Yeah, or you
for
just
no good reason?
hate your partner
It's
out
like,
of
what did I eat?
yeah. So I never really thought about that. There's no reason or guarantee that the person possess or the spirit possessing you will be of the same gender. And it made me wonder, okay, relationships can be wrecked, but would that maybe cause a person to develop feelings for someone of their same gender?
Now, one thing I didn't find in the book, but it just popped in my head as a question is, what if the possessor is gay male, or well, gay female,
Sure,
as a male, it's supposed to be a gay male, and so all of a sudden, am I going to start, you know, making it turn gay? Because to my knowledge, you're born gay. It's like being born left-handed,
sure.
as far as males are concerned. That's been scientifically proved. So, but this is a twist on that possibility. I mean, and if they were addicted to sex with guys, is the possessee going to suddenly start doing that, or maybe just when they drink? I don't know. I mean,
Well, if I was
I
possessed,
didn't I didn't find that the answer to that in the book. Did you?
no. I mean, if I was possessed by a lesbian, I guess I wouldn't notice much of a difference, except I might, get a shorter haircut. I guess I don't know. I honestly don't know. But if I was possessed by the spirit of a formerly gay man or person who'd passed on, then yeah, it's possible that I could develop feelings for people of the same gender. Or if I was possessed by a woman, I might find myself looking at men completely differently
Yeah,
because that would be in alignment with
yeah,
my sexual identity
yeah,
or the
yeah.
sexual identity of the spirit.
Well, and and it causes all kinds of other physical symptoms. Besides PMS, water retention, cramping, a lack of energy or exhaustion was a big one. Insomnia, obesity with resultant hypertension,
Wow.
as well as asthma, allergies. Um, and she wrote that spirits seem to bring an imprint of their physical bodies exactly as they were at death. So it doesn't seem like you suddenly pop back to being your peak 20.
Hmm.
If you're 75 and you have all these physical issues, apparently you take these physical issues with you in your astral self.
No, no,
This, you
that's
know,
not good.
and then those physical issues affect the living organism that's being possessed. It causes people feel like they feel stoned, drunk, hungover for no reason. It says possession by a spirit of an elderly person often results in symptoms that are common with older people, like blurry vision, aches and pains, hello, and general tiredness. Possession can also result in mental and emotional problems such as lack of concentration, as well as fears and phobias that are not inherent to the person possessed. And she wrote, quote, "It was only after successful depossession that they realized who had been responsible, and they were finally freed of these symptoms."
Huh. That's interesting. And it's funny, I've known people that they acted much older than their physical age, but not in a good way. It almost like I've known people that were young or relatively young, but they acted dead, almost dead inside, almost as if they were prematurely aged, but in a spiritual way. And there's a quote that that said, "I've known people who died when they were 25, but they weren't buried until they were 60."
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
So, going further into the book, she differentiates between the different types of possessions. Some of them were willing, and some of them were unwilling. So she says, quote, under unwilling possessions, she wrote, quote, I believe we are spirits inhabiting physical vehicles or bodies, which we shed at death, much as we discard old, worn out overcoats. The consciousness of the body comes from the inner being, the self, which is connected to the body by a silver cord. Very interesting. Very interesting. I've
Interesting
heard
that
of the
she
silver
wrote that
cord.
because that's a metaphysical thing. It's interesting
Classic.
to have a
Many OBE travelers, silver
yeah,
cord,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So going back in, quote, an accident, drug overdose, blow to the head, any condition which creates unconsciousness, even briefly, opens the door for possible possession because the aura is extremely vulnerable at that time when consciousness is being regained. So that is incredible. Even according to Dr. Fiore, playing with a Ouija board can open oneself up to possession by an outside entity. Wow. Wow. How many times have we heard stories about Ouija boards and bad things going south really fast?
Um, you got automatic writing and channeling,
Yes.
as well as magical evocation and
An
invocation.
invocation, yes.
Dude, got like
So,
playing with the Ouija board. There's a very old saying, "Don't bring up what you can't put down," and it has to do with invoking or evoking spirit entities.
and here's some more white rabbit advice to all would be magicians out there. A, know what you're doing. B, always banish before a ritual. Always banish.
Before and
Anyway,
after.
yes, exactly. So, does proximity play a key in this?
Well, like she said, kid in the hospital and their spirits had just died, just waiting to jump on somebody's weakened aura. So people that are there all the time, like doctors, nurses, paramedics, people who work at cemeteries, or people that hang out. This isn't going to please some people. People hang out where spirits are attracted to because of their addictions, like smoking,
Mm.
drinking, doing certain kinds of drugs. So whether it's a bar or a hangout where you got a bunch of crystal meth addicts hanging out all the time, there are going to be spirits attracted to those places.
I can see working in a hospital or working in a hospice care center is a great way of getting in proximity of these spirits. Wow, wow, just wow. So Dr. Fiore also said that not every possession is the same, yes, but she also said there was different signs or different ways of knowing whether or not you've been possessed, and she gave a really interesting list. I'll name off the list just for our listeners to understand. One was a low energy level. Two, character shifts or mood swings. Three, inner voices speaking to you. Four, abuse of drugs, including alcohol. Five, impulsive behavior or behaviors. Six, memory problems. Seven, poor concentration. Eight, sudden onset of anxiety or depression. Nine, sudden onset of physical problems with no obvious cause. 10, emotional and or physical reactions to reading the book The Unquiet Dead or anything that would endanger the possession by the spirits. That one, number 10, really got to me. Anything that's a threat to the possessing entity can cause you to have an
Anxiety,
emotional.
yeah,
And in classical exorcism, the person who's possessed has a reaction to religious symbols or the arrival of the priest. They freak out. So there's some interesting tie in here. Very interesting.
okay. Before we finish up, just want to say in the book, once again, The Unquiet Dead by Dr. Edith Fiore, she goes into depossession techniques,
Mm-hmm.
which we will not get into because of possible due to possible liability. But so we recommend everyone do their own research and, if necessary, seek professional help in pursuing any course of action regarding the subject.
Yes.
Um,
And
Final take.
and do pick up a copy of her book. It's called The Unquiet Dead by Dr. Edith Fiore. The parts that we left out, that the actual how is in the book. And as Dante was saying, whenever you're faced with a physical or psychological ailment, your first course of action should always be seek professional help. Nothing that we mention in the show should be construed as offering any type of medical or psychological advice or consultations. That's not
Well, I will give
what it's
you
about.
a little piece of advice. She talked about the aura and the strength of the
Yes.
aura. So, doing things that strengthen the aura. When you first wake up in the morning, filling yourself with light and strengthening your aura before you start the stresses of the day,
Yes.
as well as when going to sleep. Use the the positive light energy to your advantage, and use your mind to use that energy to strengthen your energy being.
Yeah, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? And again, if you've gone the professional or regular route and it hasn't worked, maybe something in this book can work for you.
And alternative um, helpers,
Yeah,
healers.
just because it's alternative medicine doesn't mean it doesn't work.
Hey, I won't say, yeah.
So, with that, I want to thank you, Dante, and thank you to our listeners for being here today.
Thank you, sir. This has been a
It's
very
been
good show. Um, Peace be unto you all. Thank
peace
you
be
for
unto you
joining
all.
us. Appreciate it. Take care.